Law enforcement in Texas have said this case is bizarre, and it seems the plot is getting even thicker in this mystery at this Texas mansion after a reported near drowning of a mom and her 3 children. This image per KPRC TV. Now, here's new video of the father, Domingo Quintana, per CW39 in Houston after an emergency child custody hearing. The shocking reaction the kids reportedly had when they were asked if they wanted to see their dad. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. This is a bizarre story. That is what deputies in Liberty County, Texas have said, and it's a story that frankly is just getting more odd with every new development, and you'll see why in just a moment. We have a lot of new questions after an emergency child custody hearing that went down on Friday last week. And we'll talk about what the kids are reportedly telling Child Protective Services in just a moment. Now, here is Quintana's mugshot. This was from his arrest, you may remember, last week on a charge that police is calling unrelated to the family's alleged near drowning last week in Liberty County, Texas. This is for the animal cruelty charge he's facing. It's a misdemeanor. The timing of it certainly raises some questions as well. You might remember on Monday last week, Quintana reportedly called 911 in the morning from this multi-million-dollar mansion located on a massive plot of land in Liberty County, Texas, more than an hour away from Houston.
You're going to have 4 kids off the on NyQuil. Multiple bottles on scene.
Now that is the radio chatter we found on Broadcastify, and according to law enforcement, Quintana called emergency services saying that his wife had taken their 3 children down to a pond on their property and she was allegedly trying to hurt the kids. Now initially it was reported that the 39-year-old woman was giving her kids NyQuil, but deputies have not confirmed that part of the story, even though you just heard NyQuil mentioned in that Broadcastify radio chatter. Now deputies have said when they arrived, they saw Domingo Quintana, the dad, wet. It appeared that he had pulled the children from the water. Those kids ages 6, 11, and 15 years old. But his wife, who's been identified by deputies as 39-year-old Jessica Quintana, was still in the water. Deputies pulled her from the pond. She and the 11-year-old were airlifted to a hospital in Houston. The other 2 children were also taken to the hospital. All 4 of them are expected to survive. Now here's what deputies told the media in the hours after this incident per Fox 26 in Houston.
I believe it was the dad that was helping get anybody that was in the water out of the water. Upon the deputies arriving, the kids were wet, the dad was wet, and the mother was still in the water. And the deputies are the ones, I believe, that got in and got the mother out of the water.
So right now, you say you're focused on the mom as the suspect or perpetrator?
So right now we don't have a specific focus on the mom or the dad. We're looking at both.
Before we get back to this episode of On the Case, I need to pause and bring you a Law&Crime legal alert. There are allegations claiming that online apps DraftKings and FanDuel are engineered for addiction. These multi-billion-dollar companies allegedly continue to put profit over safety. Every free bet, every boosted parlay, and every small payout triggers a dopamine rush that creates dependency and turns harmless fun into a detrimental habit. They keep you hooked, chasing impossible wins, and trap you in a cycle that can lead to significant financial loss and ultimately damage mental health. Our legal sponsors are taking on the online gambling industry to potentially get compensation for all of those impacted. So if you or a loved one has suffered addiction, financial hardship, or mental health issues due to sports betting apps, visit gamblinglawsuit.com/OTC to take a short quiz and check your eligibility to file a claim. Now, at the time of this recording, charges have not been filed against Quintana or his wife or anyone associated with this near drowning incident. It's also important to note that Liberty County deputies did say at the time that Quintana called them and in the hours after that he had cooperated. He even went down to the police station to answer questions. And again, he is not charged related to the incident that we're talking about that took place with the pond, his wife, and the kids at their home. Law enforcement, though, as you heard them there, said they are investigating everyone involved. Deputies say that as they were investigating investigating Quintana's property, they found an emaciated cat locked in a shed without food and water. And they also found dogs and chickens in alleged bad conditions on the property. So Quintana, in the hours after this, what sounds like very traumatic event at his home involving his wife and his 3 kids, he was booked on a misdemeanor animal cruelty charge. He spent the night in jail. He bonded out last week after a hearing where his bond was set at $5,000. And then here was the scene outside the jail. You had media members swarming him, and he covered his face, refusing to answer any questions as he got into an SUV and drove away from the Liberty County Jail. Now, before I get to what the kids are now saying since they have recovered in the hospital, let me remind you that police seemed somewhat confused and suspicious about what happened when they spoke to the media in the hours after they responded to this house.
Yes, sir.
How would you describe the scene here and what transpired?
I would describe it as bizarre and breathtaking, seeing everything that we've been faced with today.
Now let's get to this new twist that we're following today. Jessica Quintana, the mom, has been upgraded to good condition. She's still in the hospital. CPS has custody of the 3 Quintana children. Now, per ABC 13 in Houston, at an emergency custody hearing in Liberty County on Friday last week, an attorney for the children told the court that when CPS workers asked the children about their mom's well-being, the children reacted, quote, negatively when they were asked if they wanted to see their dad, Domingo Quintana. The judge granted the mom a 1-hour visitation with the children, but Domingo Quintana is barred from seeing the children. Remember, this is the man who said he called 911 because his wife was allegedly trying to hurt the kids, but he has been barred from seeing them as of now. Now, the report also says that the court is looking for a mental health care facility for the 2 older kids who are ages 15 and 11. Another big mystery in this story is, frankly, who Domingo Quintana is. Right out of the gate, deputies said that they were told that he sold cars for a living, but they couldn't prove that, which we certainly found odd. He lives in this massive $3 million mansion with his wife and kids, and yet deputies publicly said they were still trying to piece together his background. Now, we have found that his family appears to have dealt with some major legal issues in recent years. This is a judgment from January of this year after Domingo Quintana was sued in 2023 in Harris County, Texas, that's where Houston is, in the category of debt, contract fraud, misrepresentation. Now, we don't have the documents laying out the case against him, but the court ruled in the favor of the plaintiff, and according to this document, Quintana was on the hook for more than $138,000. We also found an active case in Liberty County, where Quintana lives, and he is being accused of not paying taxes for years on a 72-acre property. The suit claims that he owes more than $43,000. Now, as for the mom, Jessica Quintana, she is listed as the owner of a property in Houston where she is accused of being more than $18,000 behind on taxes per the Harris County Tax Collector's website. This is all public information. Now, it's unclear if any of these civil issues factor into whatever happened at the house on Monday last week. We do know this family has lived in this mansion, which has a big gate on the outside, as you see here, that calls it the Rancho Monte Carmelo, since 2017. According to law enforcement, they bought the land, then built the mansion on the land. Joining us now to talk about this is family law attorney Randy Kessler. It's always great to have you on Law and Crime. And this story is just, police called it bizarre. That's their words. And it just seems like it just keeps getting, kind of the plot thickens, I guess. What just for you, in working in family law, I'm sure you've seen every dynamic you can think of, every sort of case you can think of. But just at this point, what stands out to you with this story?
Expect the unexpected, right? Every time you think you know something, you think you know, it's funny. We tell clients sometimes who think, I know what's going to happen in this case. I know what the situation is. I know what everyone's going to believe. I say, go watch another case and sit through the case. And at the end of the case, you're going to think you know what's going to happen, and surprise, something is going to change your mind and something out of left field is going to happen, because that's really family law 101 is expect the unexpected. And this was, you don't expect the mom to do this to her children. You don't expect her to be accused. Then you don't expect dad, and you don't, it just, and it also means don't prejudge people, don't prejudge the facts. You don't know until you know. We don't know what the cops know, and the cops don't know it all yet. So there's a lot to learn.
There is a lot to learn. The most recent update came in on Friday, and this emergency custody hearing. And, you know, this dad is not facing, Domingo Quintana is not facing any charges at the time of this recording related to this incident on the pond, and the mom isn't facing those charges either. But we know that CPS said in court that when asked about the father, the kids reacted negatively. In these types of hearings, what does that mean? When, I mean, beyond kind of just the, obviously there was some sort of negative reaction to hearing about their dad.
So it's interesting, Chris. We were talking just before we went on air. There's this new, it's a Uniform Laws Commission. What they do is the National Conference of Commissioners on Uniform State Laws, they put out laws so judges and states can have some predictability with how do you handle things like this. Because how does a judge interview a child? What gets said in those interviews? How do you make sure you don't harm the child and make the child even worse off when you're trying to protect the child? So, you know, these situations are always unique and they always clarify something for me, because you come out of that and just a sense, and like you said, the children reacted negatively or weren't excited to go see dad. That's a big tell. And again, we're not on the criminal side. This situation, this hearing was just to see, in the meantime, who should take care of the children, or should they be exposed to or see their mom or their dad. And it seems like they're letting them see their mom supervised, not letting them see their dad. Now again, it's a civil standard. They're just trying to figure out what's best for the children, not as anybody guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. But certainly if you're thinking about prosecuting, you're starting to think, if those kids don't want to see their dad, either dad did something bad, or maybe they've been told bad things about their father. I mean, you really don't know yet, but it's a sign that maybe mom's more innocent than dad. It's a first step. And you know, it's sort of interesting that the prosecutors have this avenue, this sort of telescope into the lives of the children that they wouldn't have in a simple criminal investigation. They wouldn't get to go interview children and see, what do you think about mom? What do you think about dad? So they're getting a lot of information, a lot of direction. Sounds like they're going to pursue dad a little bit further after this, would be my guess.
Right, because I think of when I hear, you know, the reacted negatively to their dad. And there's a lot of people who don't like their dad, you know, who just, you know, would react negatively with their dad anyway. But for someone, the attorney for the children, to say that in court, does that mean, I guess, what's the bar for reacting negatively when it comes to whether they would actually go to the care of their dad? Because we don't know anything about this guy. Maybe he's just a hot-tempered dad, but it's not anything violent. Or is it something where they were asked about this incident on Monday and their version of events is very different than the version that he was telling police?
Well, again, that's why it's going to be good to have these uniform rules on how do you interview children and what do you do with that. So probably what happened is the judge wasn't really interrogating the children, saying, do you like your mom? Do you like your dad? The judge was just trying to lay back and figure out, okay, how do these kids feel about it? The kids don't get to decide anyway. The judge makes the ultimate decision. But the reaction that we heard through their attorney was, you know, when the subject was raised about seeing your father or spending time with your father, they weren't jumping up and down about it. And, you know, it'd be an easy decision if the kid said, where's my dad? I want to go see my dad. And where's my mom? I want to go see my mom. And there was no hesitation. The fact that there was some hesitation is a starting point. And again, you don't convict somebody on that. And that's not a lot of people could be mad at their dad because they cut their allowance or because they didn't bring them to the ball game. Right. But this sounds like it's a little more depth than that. And you got to trust that this court system, these judges, they know what they're doing. They're not asking simple questions like, does daddy get you dessert? Is that why you're not, you know, they're going to ask more generic kind of, okay, let's see how he reacts to this, how she reacts to that. So I would think this is sort of opening the door and turning it, pivoting the eyeballs onto dad a little bit more. And we got to be careful because we don't want the children to ever feel like they caused their dad to get into trouble because of something they said. So it's all sorts of things you're balancing. But the first thing, of course, is protect the children, make sure they're not exposed to anybody that could cause them harm. On the other hand, they need to see their parents, so at least they're getting to see their mom. And we all say supervised sounds terrible. Supervised parenting time doesn't have to be terrible. It just means there's somebody else in the room. The kids don't even know they're being supervised. It's just there's somebody watching just in case, because we have to watch out for children first and foremost.
On the flip side of it with the mom, because I think of the dad and he's the only witness. Like, there's no security camera footage on the property according to law enforcement of what happened. And the mom was the one, according to the dad, who was trying to harm the kids. That was his version of events. And the fact that even under a supervised, I guess if there was validity to that statement, would a judge even allow supervision with the kids, a supervised visit where she's getting, I think, an hour of visitation with these three kids?
I mean, this is what makes family law fascinating to me. It's a balancing act, right? You've got only one witness, and you want to protect the children, but this natural bond. The children are traumatized, and they're probably mostly traumatized by being removed from their household and from their parents. And so how do you balance reducing the trauma to the children by letting them regain some normalcy and being reassured by their mother because you're not sure that the mother did anything wrong, and at the same time trying to make sure that if mother did something wrong, there's some eyeballs in the room, there's some protections in place for the children. How do we balance this so that the children come out, I don't want to say unscathed, but as less scathed as possible? And I think the judge, from what I know, struck the right balance. You get to see your mom. Unless we know mom did something bad, you get to see your mom. And if mom, under the microscope with the supervisor, acts strangely, then maybe we stop that, we withdraw that. I mean, they're still under the umbrella of the court can jump in at any time. But, I think it's too drastic to say you just don't see any of your parents till we get this all sorted out, because how do you get back that time? How do you restore that faith in the relationship if you don't see your mom? And again, innocent until proven guilty here in America.
100%. And that's kind of the tough part with this story too, is like, it's easy to kind of speculate on who did right, who did wrong, but like charges at the time that we're talking, like have not been filed in connection to this case. Two of the children, the older children, I believe, the 11 and the 15-year-old, they said they're looking for a mental health care facility for them. Like when you're talking about minors, what could that mean as far as where they're going? And could that mean that they have had, and here I go speculating, but any sort of previous issues with mental health?
It could mean that, and it sounds pretty dramatic. Very rarely do we see minors being institutionalized or put into an in-house kind of treatment. Usually they're caregivers or they're professionals that will meet with them and they'll talk to them. But they also want to get them, they need somebody to take care of them. So maybe it's a balance of, if they're not going to be with their parents, then living with strangers would be awkward because it would be temporary. So let's put them in a facility, it's a horrible word, but a place that knows how to deal with these and can listen and treat them. But yeah, I mean, this sounds pretty serious to put children into an inpatient treatment place. I got to imagine there's some other issues or some prior history that would make the state feel like that was the appropriate placement for them.
And then and I know this is more on the criminal side, but I think of Domingo Quintana, the father, and he calls and he witnessed this terrible event, he says, at his house. He went into the water to save his children. Police did say that the mom was still in the water, and then the deputies had to pull her out when they arrived. But hours after this, he is charged with a misdemeanor animal cruelty charge. And I think, animals are very important, and I'm not saying that that isn't a serious issue, but what do you just make of the timing of that?
What I've been reading, what I've been seeing, which makes sense to me, is it's an excuse to get him into custody so that he can't do any more harm, so that he can't lawyer up, so that he can't start planning and plotting and maybe moving evidence around. It's just to be safe. Let's just keep him here and while we investigate. So we sort of lock everything in time. Whatever the facts are, whatever the evidence is, it doesn't change. That could be one of the motives. And again, look, people get into trouble sometimes more for hurting animals. I mean, you think about how harsh the sentence was for Michael Vick and some other folks. People, we can't minimize harm and cruelty to animals, but yes, arresting him for that and actually keeping him, maybe he blurts out something, maybe he gives some evidence towards this other case that is sort of manna from heaven that they didn't expect. So you never know. It also taints him if you're looking at him as a potential suspect. It's not a prior consistent act. It's not like hurting animals is the same as hurting children, but if someone was likely to do that and he's guilty of that, does it make it more likely that he might have hurt his children? It's all sort of in that same genre. Strange, bizarre, expect the unexpected.
Without a doubt. And that's the thing, is it's unrelated that it was, but they were searching the property when they found multiple animals in these conditions. Maybe it was something that they just couldn't overlook, but the timing, I think, in a story that's just been suspicious, it raises some questions in some ways. When it comes to his defense attorney at this point, he's not charged with anything. I'm not sure who his defense attorney is, but knowing that you had this event at your house, and maybe he's telling the truth, and that's the thing, that it's easy to speculate that he isn't, but maybe he is telling the truth. How does a defense attorney in this situation, even a family law attorney, considering that this custody situation is going on, I mean, how do you handle all these different moving pieces that are happening right now?
So that's difficult. That's when there should be a family law attorney, and there should be a defense attorney, and they should be in sync, lockstep, because you don't want him to say something that convicts himself or incriminates himself. On the other hand, if he just zips it, like we always hear, don't speak to the police, don't say anything, don't talk to a judge, he may lose a relationship with his children, which is obviously something that most people find, incredibly important. So there's a balance. If he's telling the truth, then, you go out there and they're not going to be able to, incriminate him or cross-examine him or impeach him on where he was or alibis or things like that. So if you're telling the truth, the criminal lawyer might say, go with the family law attorney and go plead your case to the judge and say, I'm an open book. I just want to take care of my kids. The question is, what we don't know is, what has he told his criminal defense lawyer? What has he told his family law attorney? And if it is that I might seemingly incriminate myself not because I did it, but because I was in that area, or because what I first reported wasn't 100% accurate, then he's got a real dilemma. And you can't really help your children if you're locked away in jail. So staying out of jail is paramount, and then making the relationship work with your children is probably secondary. That's how it usually unfolds in our area.
Well, because I think too, I'm sure a week ago on Monday, who knows what happened, but if his story is true, he wasn't expecting to be in this situation where even people like us are talking about him 1 week later. So you pretty much, in these types of cases, if you have kids and you've been arrested, like having two attorneys is something that you have to go with. Your criminal defense attorney couldn't be the person at that custody hearing on Friday.
No, I'm glad you pointed that out, Chris. There are a lot of lawyers that are great at doing everything. I personally try to be good at family law. It's very hard for me to be good at more things. Family law is already complicated enough. If you can get someone who specializes in family law for custody for the children and someone who specializes in criminal law, but in small towns, a lot of times lawyers are general practitioners, and there's some lawyers that are really good at both. But the point is, even if it's one lawyer, they put on their criminal hat and think about how to defend him from crime accusations, and their family law hat. And sometimes there's a tension there. What do you say to the police? You want to advance your case, being able to get your kids, but you don't want to go to jail. You don't want to be convicted. You want to make sure that you don't get convicted of a crime first and foremost, because no matter what, innocent or guilty, if you get convicted of a crime, it's going to be harder to have a relationship with your children. So staying out of jail is probably paramount. But if he can stay out of jail and still promote his relationship with his children, that's obviously the goal. It's probably his goal. It would be my goal if I was his lawyer. So how do you reconcile? What can you say to the police? What can you not say to the police? The good thing for him is if he doesn't talk to the police, they're not going to say, oh, you're not talking to us, so you don't get custody of your kids. He's got an excuse, right? The lawyer has told me don't talk. So he can hide behind that. The custody judge might say, sir, if you want to see your kids, I need to know what happened that day and I want to know what's going on. And he would say, Judge, I'd love to tell you, but my criminal defense lawyer is telling me until I'm either granted immunity or not, under arrest or under look or under suspicion, I just can't say anything as much as I'd like to. Judges get that because it's legitimate.
And we've seen him twice in media reports since, the animal cruelty arrest and then heading into these hearings. He's not answering questions from the media. I'm sure on the attorney side of it, it can be frustrating with how that looks and it's perceived in the media where you have the reporter and look, I've done it. You're asking questions and the person's not answering. He comes out of the jail and he's covering his face, and then I could see that not looking great. What is your advice to a client in these situations about how to handle that? Especially, I don't know how public of a person he was before. We can't really find a lot of information on him, but I'm sure he's never been in a situation where you have multiple cameras in your face and journalists asking a ton of questions.
No offense, Mr. Journalist, Chris Stewart. Ignore the journalist. Follow your lawyer's advice, right? You got that human instinct that wants to say, leave me alone, I didn't do anything, I love my family. If your lawyer says that's okay, fine. If your lawyer says don't, your lawyers are thinking objectively, right? And there's that old saying, he who represents himself has a fool for a client. You don't follow your own advice, you follow an expert's advice. And if someone is telling you, don't talk to the media, don't talk to them. If someone's saying, here's a statement to release and I'll cover it with you, use that. But, trust the people you hire to give you advice. You're hiring them for a reason.
All right, family law attorney Randy Kessler, just a bizarre case out of Texas. We're continuing to watch and see if any new developments come down. It's always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.